Hello, everyone. I'm Barry Walton, and like everybody else, I'm working from home these days. And it goes without saying, living out in the country, not having a fiber broadband connection, makes my day very interesting at times when it comes to the availability and the reliability of the technology that I'm using. So be forewarned, there may be some video breakup, some voice degradation, but we'll do the best we can. I have taken some precautions to reboot my modem, rebooted my computer, and as well have asked all of my family members to stay off of the internet for the next little while until I conclude my presentation. So hopefully everything will go well. Today I'm going to be talking about some lessons learned that I gained by working on a fiber broadband initiative that passed a lot of different communities in Canada. You can probably tell by my accent, I am from Canada. And we do have some interesting weather here. And believe it or not, there was a program that I was involved in that spanned all of the seasons, including the winter. So we rolled out fiber broadband to a lot of different communities through all of the different seasons. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what I'm going to be covering here today in my presentation. So hopefully, let's cross our fingers, my technology will work to bring up my presentation. So today, the topic I'm covering is the art of delivering a successful fiber broadband build. And I'm hoping that after this session today that you'll have a few takeaways that will enable you to experience what I experienced by using some of these techniques that brought in a program that spanned several years that, believe it or not, came in under budget and delivered more homes than what we'd anticipated. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry now for 41 years in telecom. I can still recall the days when I started out putting on my climbing spurs and climbing my first telephone pole. That was quite an experience, to say the least. I now know that I still have my spurs out in the garage and probably won't be putting them on again. Those were long days gone by. So as I touched on a little earlier, I led a program to pass a lot of different homes and businesses to over 100 communities in Canada. And after that, I had a semi-retirement period of time, and then I came back into the industry, joining Corning 3 years ago. And part of my role at Corning is to share my experience and provide guidance to communities across North America, similar to what I'm doing here today on my presentation with you folks. As well, present at national conferences and international conferences. And I must say, I am really missing that this year. Doing the virtual conferences are definitely not the same as interacting with the audience to share the lessons learned, and as well, after the event, having those sidebar discussions to elaborate a little bit more in some of the content that I typically cover. I live in a place called New Brunswick, Canada, and for those that may not know where New Brunswick, Canada is, it's located on the east coast of North America in Canada, and my province borders the state of Maine, so I'm far east. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of 5 pillars of fiber broadband in terms of the enablers to ensure a successful program. 1 is the planning, 2, relationships, 3, reducing the risks, 4, product considerations, and 5, the operationalizing of the network. And this is basically the network gets turned up. How do everything kind of work together based on the network that was built? So we'll be covering all these topics today. So planning. Having a solid plan is foundational to the success of the build. So I always compare it to, you wouldn't build a house without a plan. Well, fiber broadband network is the same. You need to clearly articulate what is it you're going to build. What is the scope of what you're building? What are the timelines? So clearly articulate that you do have a plan, that you have a clear line of scope. Without a clear line of scope, typically what you run into is projects that overrun or get into difficulty. So very key to know going in what the scope of the project is going to be. Well articulated, identifying the dependencies. So again, with a fiber broadband build, there are other dependencies outside of what you're doing to enable you constructing your network. So things like permitting, could be water course permits, could be permits to get on poles, civil permits, all those are all what I call the dependencies for you to be successful on rolling out your fiber broadband network. Next item, design standards. So again, going back to the example of building a house, There are standards of how you build homes. Well, with a fiber broadband network, they have similar standards in terms of what provides you with how much sparing should I put into a cable, where should my electronics be, where should my terminals be. So these are what I call the standards. So having a clear line of sight of what the standards are, so that when you go to build a network, it's basically the recipe of how you build your plans to construct a network. Communication strategy to all stakeholders. And I touched on this a little briefly, that there are going to be dependencies. Well, having a clear, concise communication plan when things arise, and things will arise on the program, that you need to reach out to one of these dependencies to help resolve an issue. So clear line of communication that is timely and responsive, that minimizes any impact on your initiative to roll out broadband. Process to measure program deliverables. What this is, again, especially if it's a community build, there's an expectation from the community. They've got behind the program. There's an expectation that the homes and businesses will get service soon. So having a program around that will managing the various aspects from the engineering right through to construction, that timelines will be met, they're well articulated, well communicated, and at the end of the day, they meet the needs of the community that would say, I expect to get service at this point in time. And the last piece, the quality program. You are investing in a network, it's infrastructure if you want to call it that, and you want it to last for the next 50 to 100 years. So ensuring that the network is designed and built, meets the standards for today and for tomorrow, and the guys that are building it, they're building it so it will last. And to summarize, I guess, planning, I always look at it as being, by failing to plan, you're preparing to fail. So take the time to plan, and typically on a community build, I would give guidance around probably 6 to 8 months to do the planning ahead, make sure you get everything well figured out before you start putting shovels in the ground or start putting cables on the poles. So relationships. So one of the dependencies, and there's a whole bunch that align depending on the community that you live in, there are the pole owners. And if you are not a pole owner, that you're looking to attach your facility, your cables to the pole owner, could be the local power utility, could be the local telephone company, then there's a thing called make ready. And basically what this is, there's a process that when you're looking to attach to a pole, you submit a set of plans, and with your intent of what you're looking to put on the pole owner will review it and determine, is the pole suitable to accept your cable. And examples of what may be required to move, there may be cables that need to be moved around to make room for your cable. It could be the case that there isn't any more room on the pole, that the pole needs to be replaced, or it could be a pole that is deteriorated and needs to be replaced. Or it could be as simple as tree trimming needs to be done. Need to get trees cleared off the line so you can place your cable. Next area, local and state road authorities. So you may have a requirement if you're burying facilities to open up the ground. So the city or the state may have a requirement and you need to apply for a permit to break ground across a road and so forth. Or attached to a bridge. Maybe you need to get underneath a bridge to get across a river crossing. Other ones as well be natural gas, could be natural gas within your area. There may be a requirement for permits or at a minimal cable locates. Then we have the one call, the cable locates as well. So if you are breaking ground, depending on what the local regulations are, reaching out to the folks at one call to let them know that you have a requirement for a whole bunch of locates to get done. Natural resources, these are the folks that basically issue the permits if you happen to go over a water crossing or under a water crossing. So another piece of the puzzle. The last piece is the railway. And if you have an intent to go over or under a railroad, they have a requirement that you apply for a permit as well. So having sound relationships with all these different identities is very key. And if possible, try and establish those relationships at the local level, at the community level. I find if you go to the district area and so on, it can be a little interesting in terms of the timelines that they turn things around for you. Dealing local, usually having that relationship, you can move things along fairly quickly and have some flexibility in terms of having access to these folks. Reducing risks. So one of the key things, again, is a cemented schedule with milestones. So clearly articulate, hey, this is our plan, this is what we're looking to do, and having measures around to measure how are we doing. There's nothing worse than having a program that's going and you have no visibility of what's going on. I compare it to if you were driving a car and you didn't have the gauges on the dash to figure out at what point am I going to run out of gas. Clear scope of work. So again, I've seen several builds where the scope of work is not clearly defined, and then all of a sudden the add-ons come in and it's like, well, I thought this is what you wanted. Another thing to help reduce the risk as well, and depending on the proximity of resources and material, considerable amount of time can chew up a day mobilizing crews to travel in and out of a community to do the work. And what I've found that works fairly well to reduce that cost and time is actually maybe at your municipal facility, if you happen to be a municipality building your own network, set up a temporary compound and mobilize, have all the trucks stored there, have all the equipment there. It can save you hours in a day of travel time, which at the end of the day, travel time, unfortunately, doesn't put cable up in the air. So another thing to think about, design optimization. So some great designers out there that do great designs, but I always encourage folks to look at having someone take a second look at the design and look to optimize it, look to find out ways where you may be able to consolidate cables all into one cable versus putting up two. Look at locations for splices in terms of where they are in proximity to the road from a safety perspective. So optimization does two things. One, reduces the cost, and as well increases the opportunity to build it without very many hiccups along the way. Have construction sign off on the design as well. These are the guys that are going to build the network, and there's nothing worse than having the design done and it goes to the construction crews and it's all of a sudden, well, we can't build it this way, we're going to do it this way, and the next thing, time is added to the job, costs are going up. So early in the design phase, have construction sign off. It says, yes, we can build it, and it'll be surprising what you'll learn from the construction folks that they will bring a different set of lenses to the plan that say, you know, if you move this cable this way, we can save a whole bunch of time. Again, encourage you to think about having construction part of the design sign off. Reduce the number of billing units, and what that is that typically on a fiber broadband build, there's a whole bunch of piece parts that need to go together. And I'll use the example, attaching to a pole, I need a nut, I need a bolt, I need a clamp, I need all these things. And in some cases, those are all billed out as separate units. Look at consolidating units. Consolidate, it says, listen, I've got a build going on that we're going to be attaching to all these poles. It's a brand new attachment. So let's bundle everything together, almost like a combo package with when you went to McDonald's to order up a meal. We'll maybe have a combo billing unit that covers everything that would include on a typical pole installation. Simplifies everything in terms of managing what is getting done and so on. Take time to vet your contractors. I always look at that and I would say spend some time, ask who they work for, get references, reach out to the customers they've worked for before, and ask them openly how did things work, what could they think they could improve on, and do that wisely. Then the last piece on the risk overall, we all want to ensure that the build goes along very successfully and nobody gets hurt, both from the folks building the network and as well the public. So take time to do a safety review. Don't assume everybody knows everything. There's nothing ever wrong with doing a refresher on safety in terms of working on poles and working around civil structures and things of that nature. So now we're going to move into talking a little bit about products, and there are some products around that will help immensely to de-risk a program and as well increase the productivity of passing homes quicker and managing overall costs. So one of the products I will talk about is what we call the Preconnectorized terminals, and a couple value pieces of using these kinds of technology is one, that very quickly you can build a network on. And I always use the example, splicing in a fiber terminal on a cable can take up to 4 hours under ideal conditions to do that, versus a pre-connectorized terminal that plugs into a cable can be done in minutes. So what I'm showing here is one of the products that Corning has recently just launched. It's what we call our Evolve platform, along with our push lock technology. And the terminal in the front here, which is very small, you can see the terminal in the back. That's our legacy terminal that's been around for quite some time. We've evolved our product set to making things smaller. And as you can look at the picture below, I'll start with the picture on the left. You can see the terminal that's hung on, looks like a piece of drop. That's actually the stub that feeds the terminal. That would be a 12 fiber stub that is energizing that terminal. And the terminal can actually hang off of that. And you can see the stub is attached to the pole with a drop wire clamp. So simplicity, easy. That same terminal can be mounted on the side of a building. So you may have a strip mall, you may have a row of garden houses. So aesthetically, this can be mounted on the side of the building. And this is, again, the same terminal as what I show on the left, that being the one attached to the drop. So the flexibility to use this terminal in many places versus ordering a separate terminal based on a different application. Then the third piece is, for folks that are doing a lot of civil work today, there's always the awareness from the community that, what are you putting on my lawn? And again, with the Evolve platform, it enables the terminals be placed in a very small handhold in the ground. So in this particular case, you can see to the right, it is a handhold. The terminal is basically installed in it. And that handhold is a 10-inch or a 12-inch handhold versus a 24 by 36. So very appeasing to the residents that are going to have one of these out in their front lawn versus the big covered solution that have been used in the network for a great many years. As well, with the terminal, we've developed a new drop that is what we call the push lock technology, and it basically just pushes in and locks into the terminal versus its predecessor where the drop was screwed in to the terminal. So a couple things that we've done to reduce cost, and again, the cost reduction is that labor component, and as well the cost on managing all these different types of terminals based on, is it an aerial terminal or is it a wall terminal or a buried terminal? We've simplified everything to be in one product versus 3 different types of terminals. And as well with the push lock terminal, where pushing a drop in versus screwing a drop in. The next item I'll talk about, this has been around for quite some time, and it's called ribbon cable. And it is a big saver of labor. And it's been around for a number of years, and was always used in the past for large fiber count cables, like cables that are 864 or the 288. However, in recent years, it's being used a lot more on fiber to the home programs for smaller fiber count cables. So a couple things to kind of focus on would be the labor component. And these are actually numbers I captured from a splicer here a while ago when I was asking him about, like, in a day, like, how do you make out splicing loose tube versus ribbon? So loose tube fiber is basically a single fiber in a cable that looks like the shape of a size of a human hair. And basically this cable splicer is splicing that together. Very small, very fine work. And the technician I was talking with would say, I can do 24 of those in an hour. I can splice 24 of those together. So can you imagine taking 24 human hairs and trying to join them together and splicing them together and doing that in an hour? So then we have another technology, and what I've talked about at the beginning is what we call a ribbon cable. And this is basically taking 12 of those loose tube fibers or human hair type size fibers, and they've been actually in the factory been put together to make up a ribbon. So as you can see in the picture on the right, the ribbon is quite sizable compared to what a human hair would be. So in the ribbon cable splicing situation, the splicer, when I asked him, so how long would it take you to do ribbon fiber splicing? He says, well, as I told you, I do 24 loose tube fibers an hour. Well, I can do 12 ribbons an hour. So you take 12 ribbons that have 12 fibers in them. That's 144 fibers an hour. So quite a lift in terms of productivity and time. So some of the key benefits: significant reduction in splicing labor. So a lot less time. And especially you have some of these areas where you're traveling out to, you can get a lot more done in a day versus having to make repeat trips back and forth. Less cost overall, faster time to bring in revenue. So the last piece I'm going to talk about is the operationalizing of the network. So you've been working hard to get the network built, and at some point it's going to be completed and turned over to the folks that are going to operate it. Now, these are the folks that are going to have the processes that will initiate service, will dispatch the technicians, what will basically start connecting up the homes and businesses. So a couple key things to think about. Partway through the build, start transitioning your operations folks into the build. And what I mean by that, have them actually take on some roles for a short period of time to get up to speed on how the network is being built. Maybe try some of the new techniques that are being used. And if you happen to going with ribbon splicing, this is a good chance for them to actually do some ribbon splicing. And as well, get an appreciation of how the network's being built. They're part of it. So look at transitioning your operations folks into the build. Establish a database to store all your fiber traces. So what is a fiber trace? So fiber traces are basically when the splicer completes splicing a cable, they are going to test it with a test set. And they're going to qualify, did everything test out based on the way I put the cable together? Are the splices good? And the set that they use actually outputs what we call a fiber trace. It gives you a record of how that fiber looks and how overall the cable looks. So having a database to store all those, so if you're having your splicers do the work, ensure you have a process where they'll send the traces in and you'll store them for future reference. And the future reference would be, you may want to make changes to the network. So you want to look at, hey, how did things look at before I touched it? Secondly, for troubleshooting, it's always good to have that information on hand to troubleshoot with. The other piece would be what I call having a quality control of the serviceable homes database. And what this is as the network is being built, homes are being determined of who will be eligible to get services. So by address, this is a database that when a customer maybe wants to go online to see, can I get service? The service will be tied to their pole or their pedestal that's out in the lawn and would say, yes, you can get service. I've seen a lot of cases where that database has been in question. Customers think they can get service only to find out they can't because there's an error in the database, but know that they didn't build out that far. So ensuring there's a good quality control around making sure that database is as clean as possible so it mitigates any issues with an irate customer thinking they can get service when they can't. Last piece would be consider a soft launch to connect customers. So now I've built the network, you may want to find some friendly customers and turn the network up with them with the expectation we're going to try some things. Gets the glitches out of maybe your internal processes of how you process their order and the times it takes the installers to do their work. So gives you a chance to kind of do a practice run and kind of let the network soak a little bit. So in summary, a couple things. Planning is foundational. Communications with dependencies. So again, all those folks that you're dependent on, making sure there's a clear line of communications with those. Leverage others, their expertise. It will take a village. In our business today, there's a great many of successful programs going on in North America, and a lot of people really like talking about what they've done and how it's worked and what they would do well differently if they had to do it again. So leverage those as well. There's a great network of folks out there. And the last piece, innovations make it work. Continue to look at technologies that overall bring in reducing cost and mitigate the risk of missing dates, and as well reduce the dependency on training a whole bunch of folks. So here's my contact information. I've covered a lot of things in a very short period of time and probably could drive down a lot farther on some of these topics. Please feel to reach out to me, and I would love to discuss a little bit more on those with you. I hope you found the session beneficial today, and thank you for your time today.